Guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is all about the UCAT Verbal Reasoning section. I'll be explaining various strategies you guys can implement when revising for the Verbal Reasoning section and also how to tackle common issues such as time management. This is a similar structure to the quantitative reasoning section as you guys really liked it. So without further ado, let's go on with the video. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Shivank and I'm currently a year 13 student and a medicine offer holder. And I thought what better way to use my time than to start a YouTube channel. So enough about me, let's get on with the video and talk about a few hints and tricks which you guys can use when revising for the verbal reasoning section. So the first tip is to base your answer only on what is in the passage. Now, within the verbal reasoning section, you're presented with a passage and then questions corresponding to the passage. Now, if the passage is something that you read about, for example, if the topic was about football and you know a lot about football and previous players, which is really good. However, don't use any external knowledge that you already had in order to influence the answer. So, for example, if you know that a particular match the score was 5-1, but in the extract the score is 4-0, which contradicts with what your knowledge is. However, the examiner only bases your answer off of what's in the passage, i.e. don't use any external knowledge that you have because it's incorrect. The idea that anything that's correct is only what's in the passage, and so you can only use this in order to answer one of the 4 answer options. So make sure you keep this in mind when doing the answers, because oftentimes we can use our external knowledge and then provide the wrong answer compared to what was actually written in the extract. Now, the second tip, don't read the entire passage. Now, this sounds very weird. We're presented with the passage, why would we not read it? This is because it wastes a lot of time. This time can be used so much more valuably by answering many more questions than rather than wasting time reading unnecessary information. Sorry to break it to you for those who do, but stop doing it. You're wasting time and this is the time to change it. So what you can do is, when revising for this, you first read the question. In the question, they'll often have key details such as name, place, thing, etc. So for example, it has someone's name like John Smith, and now using this data that you've taken from the question, you can then skim read the passage. This is different to reading the passage because you're only looking for the key details, such as the name in this case. Now, whenever you see the name John Smith, you know immediately that it's related to the question, and then you can read through the passage of that particular section. Also, if it's a comprehension-based paragraph, you can read the first sentence, and that usually outlines what the entire passage will be. And based upon this, depending on the question, you can easily answer and eliminate other answer options. So, for example, if the question was about John Smith, going back. Now, we can read the first paragraph and it says, oh, let's talk about Mr. Smith. This is clearly showing that this passage about Mr. Smith, about John Smith, so we only need to read the first paragraph. There's no point reading the rest because let's say in the second and third paragraphs, there's no mention of John Smith, and so we know that we don't need to know this. So this way, it really saves valuable time that we would have otherwise wasted reading unnecessary paragraphs that we don't really need. So now moving on to tip number 3, which is to eliminate answer options already. So let's say there's 4 answer options, and you skim through the passage after reading the question, and you've already eliminated 2 answer options straight away. So now you're left with 2 answer options. If you, by quickly noticing answer options, you know that it will take a bit more time having to read through the passage because they're quite similar to each other, then you can simply just guess between those 2 and then move on. This is because with 2 answer options, you have a 50% chance of getting it right, which is clearly better than a 25% or a 33% chance. So just flag the question and move on, because it's much better use of your time rather than spending time reading the entire paragraph or even passage if you really have to just try and find some minuscule details. Now, tip number 4 is be careful of language. Wait, that doesn't make sense. Be careful of absolute language. That makes more sense. This is because you want to avoid things that say always, never, because it's usually incorrect. So, for example, the statement said, Bill always walks to school. And, for example, the extract says, Bill walked to school on this day. Now, we clearly can't tell if Bill walks to school every single day, or it could be false, it could be true. It's a very confusing question because he could be walking to school every single day because he's walked on this day. Also, it's false because he's only walked this day perhaps and he hasn't walked the other days. So in this situation, when it usually says absolute language, such as always, never, it's usually can't tell. Don't go back word for word for this, so don't blame me. But 90% of the time, if it says always, it's usually can't tell because the extract will usually say like 1 day out of the 10, for instance. Also, be careful of tense. This is kind of tip number 4, linking on to tip number 3. Making sure you're careful of tense because, for example, it could be talking about Bill currently walks to school, and the extract said Bill used to walk to school every single day. And this is not the same, so again, it will be can't tell. So now moving on to tip number 5. This is where you look at the answer options, and let's say one of the answer options is true. So for an answer option to be true, it must be directly stated within the extract. So if it's indirectly stated, that's not enough. It has to be directly stated for you to be able to identify and then select true. Also, there's sometimes a simple calculation that needs to be done. You sometimes have to do it in order to answer true. If it's very close to the answer option, but it's not always correct, it will usually be can't tell. And so make sure if it fits these criteria and is always correct and in the passage for it to be true. So now moving on to tip number 6, which is links on to tip number 5. If, for instance, you have to make an inference based upon whether it's true or not, make sure it links well. For example, Bill's school lasts from Monday to Thursday, and he goes to school every single one of those days. Then the answer option says Bill goes to school every single day for school. We can assume that the school is always Monday to Thursday rather than, for example, 1 week it's Monday to Friday, and so we can correctly assume it's true that Bill goes to school Monday to Thursday every single day. However, if in the example it says Bill goes to school Monday to Thursday, and the question says, does Bill go to school every single day, Monday to Friday? Now, in our brains, we perhaps could think that Bill goes to school every single day out of the schools that they provide. However, the question says Bill goes to school Monday to Friday, and Bill's school does not offer Friday school. So this, in this case, it actually be false because he doesn't go to school on Friday, and so he doesn't walk there. So what I'm trying to say is make sure the link that you make is logical. If you make too many links that seem illogical eventually, then the question is most likely to be false. Just make sure the inferences you make or the links you make are simple enough for it to be true. So sometimes, unfortunately, the statement, let's say, says Jack buys sweets, and then in the passage it says Jack buys sweets. So then you think immediately, okay, fine, let's just select this, and it's true. It's clearly true. However, if you read more closely, it perhaps says Jack buys sweets every other day, so not every single day, for instance. Or sometimes if it's way too obvious like this, there's usually a hidden trick. So for example, let's say it says Jack buys sweets, then in the previous extract, it could be talking about a different Jack. So let's say there's Jack A and there's Jack B. The question talk about Jack A, but the passage talk about Jack B. So if it sometimes seems too obvious, it probably is. So just read a bit more closely to make sure you don't fall into these hidden traps. So if someone was to ask me, why is the verbal reasoning section the hardest section of the UCAT? Why do students typically perform worse in VR compared to QR, DM, etc.? And the answer I would tell them is because of the words. Honestly, because of the words, it really, for me personally, English was one of my weakest subjects. And so whenever I had thought of the entire passage, my brain immediately was like, okay, I can't bother. There's an entire passage I have to read. It's going to take way too much time. But by using this technique that I mentioned of reading the question first and just skimming the passage, my brain automatically realized that, okay, I don't have to spend much time reading the entire passage. I just have to look for keywords here and there, almost like a crossword or a word search kind of puzzle. And I think that made it much easier for me. I think in our brains, our mindset automatically thinks that's much longer than, for example, DM or QR, because you just have to do a simple calculation or, for example, multiple calculations. Whereas in VR, you have to read an entire passage, question, then look at the answer options. It just gets quite lengthy. And so with VR, I think we often underestimate how difficult it can be with the passage, and also we perhaps our time management is quite poor. For example, reading the entire passage, question and answer options can be quite time consuming. And so it's important that you eliminate answer options immediately that aren't valid, and also just guess and flag. Honestly, flagging questions was really useful in my exam because I didn't go back to questions which I had any doubt and then revisit them and then do well in that afterwards. So guys, thank you for watching. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider liking and also consider subscribing if you want more UCAT videos such as decision making, situation judgment, etc. Also, I'll be doing a UCAT verbal reasoning section where I'll be answering questions live, and so hopefully you guys will be interested in that. Anyways, thank you for watching.